The Sanctum of Concord was a void carved into the heart of a neutron star, its walls shimmering with the contained fury of degenerate matter, a testament to the power and hubris of the Galactic Council. Light here was not born of stars, but of philosophy, a cool, intellectual luminescence emanating from the very architecture, shifting in hue and intensity with the gravity of the discourse. At the center of this impossible chamber, suspended in a field of stabilized spacetime, sat the High Council, beings of crystal, of gas, of flesh, and of ideas, each a sovereign voice for 1,000 star systems. And for the first time in millennia, the light in the sanctum was tinged with the cold, gray color of fear. The silence was a living thing, a pressure against the consciousness of every delegate, broken only by the rhythmic, grating clicks of General Archon Kress of the Vorlag Ascendancy, a sound that spoke of impatience and coiled violence. Xyler, prime speaker of the Cathar Collective, let the silence settle deeper. His own form, a complex crystalline lattice, pulsed with a slow, internal light of troubled amethyst. He felt the gazes of the others, the simmering rage from Kress, whose reptilian form was a study in predatory stillness, the detached curiosity of the Lumina emissary, a being of pure, coherent energy that perceived time as a landscape rather than a river, the anxious rustling of the Silan delegates, their plant-like bodies swaying as if in an unfelt wind. They were all waiting. They were all watching the void beyond the veil. "The reports are unambiguous," Kress finally rasped, his voice a low grinding of stone on stone. His thick armored head swiveled, his multifaceted eyes fixing on the central display, a swirling, three-dimensional representation of the galactic arm where cycles ago they had erected the ultimate quarantine. The Veil of Exile. Patrols are vanishing. Long-range sensors detect energy signatures that defy our understanding of physics. They are building something, a weapon. The vermin we sought to contain have festered in the darkness we granted them. The word vermin hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. Xyler remembered the day of the edict. He had been a junior delegate then, his crystalline structure still sharp with the certainty of youth. He had watched as the verdict was passed, as humanity was declared a cognitive contagion, a species whose defining traits, unfettered ambition, chaotic individualism, and a terrifying capacity for both creation and destruction in the name of abstract ideals, were deemed an existential threat to the carefully maintained harmony of the galaxy. They had not been conquered. They had been excised. Their small corner of the galaxy was encased in a spacetime blockade, a prison from which nothing could escape and into which nothing could enter. The Council had declared them outlawed, stripped of galactic personhood, and then for centuries had tried to forget them. "A weapon is the most direct conclusion, General Archon," Xyler projected, his thoughts resonating through the chamber's psychoconductive medium as a calm, sonorous chord. "But it is not the only one. The signatures are structured. They possess a harmony, a complexity that is more akin to a symphony than to the chaotic discharge of a weapon system." "Harmony?" Kress scoffed, a rattling hiss escaping his vocalizers. "The humans know nothing of harmony. They are a species defined by discord. Their art was violent, their music was dissonant, their politics a perpetual storm of conflict. They glorified the self above the whole. That is why we passed the Edict of Exile. That is why they were deemed unfit. To suggest they are now composing symphonies in the dark is sentimentality, speaker, a weakness we can no longer afford." The Lumina emissary, a silent observer until now, shimmered. Its form, a column of soft, golden light, coalesced and a wave of pure thought washed over the assembly. It was not words, but a concept, a feeling. That which is different is not always that which is dangerous. A storm may carve a new riverbed. Kress bristled, his armored plates shifting audibly. The Lumina's penchant for metaphor is ill-suited to matters of galactic security. We have evidence of a threat. For generations, they have been left to their own devices in their cage. We underestimated their tenacity, their sheer, stubborn refusal to fade into cosmic dust. Now they are pushing against the bars. My fleets are mobilized. They await the Council's consensus to act. We must sterilize the veil before what is inside breaks free. Xyler felt a tremor of disquiet run through his being, a flicker of discordant blue light within his amethyst core. Sterilize. The word was so clinical, so final. He remembered the last transmissions from the humans before the veil had fully solidified. They were not cries for mercy or threats of vengeance. They were messages of confusion, of art, of poetry, of defiant philosophical treatises broadcast into the void. They were a species that, when faced with oblivion, chose to sing. It had been unsettling then, and it was terrifying now. They had not behaved as a conquered people should. "Your fleets, General Archon," Xyler stated, his tone level but firm, would be attacking a phantom. We do not know what we are facing. To act with such aggression is to fire blindly into the dark. We do not know the nature of these energy readings, the fate of our patrols, or the current state of human civilization. We have only our own ancient fears to guide us, and fear is the most treacherous of navigators. Fear is a survival instinct, Kress countered, rising slightly from his position, his powerful frame exuding menace. It is what keeps the predator sharp and the prey alive. We are not facing a philosophical debate, we are facing a resurgence. The humans were outlawed because their very nature was a solvent to galactic stability. Their ideas were more dangerous than their warships. They celebrated the lone hero, the defiant artist, the revolutionary thinker. In a galaxy built on consensus and the slow, deliberate progress of millennia, they were a wildfire. We contained it. Now we smell smoke. The central display shifted. A new sensor reading, forwarded from the monitoring stations at the Veil's edge, painted a fresh layer of data over the galactic map. The energy signature was growing, not in chaotic bursts, but in a steady, rhythmic pulse. It was a slow, cosmic heartbeat, resonating at a frequency that had no precedent. It did not radiate outward like a weapon's discharge. It seemed to be folding space-time inward, drawing reality toward a single, incomprehensible point. The analyst had attached a note, a single sentence that sent a wave of fresh anxiety through the sanctum. The energy output is not decreasing with distance. The laws of inverse square do not apply. The chamber fell silent again, a heavier, more profound silence than before. A phenomenon that ignored one of the fundamental laws of the universe was not technology as they understood it. It was something else, something fundamental. Xyler felt the lumina's focus intensify, its golden light deepening. Even Kress seemed momentarily stunned into stillness, his reptilian mind struggling to categorize a threat that refused to conform to known parameters. Xyler turned his focus inward, accessing the deep archives of the Cathar Collective, the crystalline memory banks that held the unfiltered history of the Council. He reviewed the case of humanity. The evidence presented against them had been overwhelming, but in hindsight, it was overwhelmingly philosophical. Human media, their captured data streams, their history, it all painted a picture of a species in constant, violent flux. But it was also a picture of a species that could produce transcendent works of beauty from that chaos. A species that could hold two opposing ideas, the sanctity of the individual and the necessity of the collective, in a perpetual, dynamic, and painful tension. The Council, in its demand for absolute harmony, had seen only the pain, not the potential. They had seen the storm, but not the new riverbed. We judged them for what they were, Xyler projected, his voice now imbued with a somber weight that commanded the attention of every delegate. But we never considered what they might become. We gave them the one thing a species like theirs would value above all else, a challenge. We isolated them, surrounded them with an impassable barrier, and told them they were a poison. Did we truly believe they would simply accept it? A species that climbed out of its own planetary gravity well on pillars of controlled fire, a species that stared into the abyss of its own self-destruction and repeatedly chose to step back from the brink. Did we think a mere wall of space-time would be the end of their story? His thoughts resonated through the silent chamber, echoing in the minds of the assembled powers. The amethyst glow of his form deepened, colored now with the stark clarity of dawning realization. We did not imprison them. We focused them, we removed all external distractions and left them with nothing but their own nature and the hard vacuum of their cage. We may have created the very thing we feared most, a humanity that has overcome its internal discord not by suppressing it as we would but by understanding it, by harnessing it. The energy signature, Kress calls it a weapon. I believe he is wrong. It is not a declaration of war, it is a statement of arrival. Before Kress could formulate a retort, a priority alert flashed across the main display, overriding all other data. It was a direct communication, originating not from the Veil's edge, but from a point deep within the Council's most secure star system, mere light minutes from the sanctum itself. The message contained no data, no language, only a set of coordinates. The coordinates for the X. Act center of the Council chamber. The message was already inside their innermost defenses. It had not broken through them, it had simply appeared. A new wave of cold dread washed through the assembly. The Vorlag delegates instinctively shifted into defensive postures. The Silen Franz trembled violently. Xyler held his form rigid, his mind racing. This was not an attack. An attack would have been explosive, destructive. This was precise. It was controlled. It was a demonstration of a capability so far beyond their own that it bordered on magic. Another transmission followed, this one containing a simple, elegant string of prime numbers, a universal greeting ancient when the Vorlag were still crawling from their spawning pools. And then, a single packet of information, translated instantly and perfectly into the formal high language of the Council. It said, "We have been listening. We request permission to speak." The light in the sanctum flickered, the steady glow of millennia of unshakable power wavering for the first time. The Outlawed had returned, and they had not knocked on the door, they had materialized in the heart of the throne room. General Archon Cress let out a low growl, a sound of pure, frustrated fury. "A trick, a Trojan horse, do not grant it. They are projecting a signal to mask their true assault." But Xyler knew better. His crystalline mind, which processed reality through the logic of patterns and resonance, felt the truth in the signal. There was no deception. There was only a profound, unnerving calm. It was the calm of a being that held all the advantages, that had no need for subterfuge. He felt the lumina's ascent, a gentle wave of golden light that meant proceed asterisk. Steeling himself, Xyler focused his will. "The Council grants permission," he projected, the thought echoing with the full authority of his office. He braced for an onslaught of data, a barrage of demands, or the sudden appearance of a hostile warship. Instead, the space above the central display shimmered. Reality seemed to thin, to become translucent. Not a ship, but a single human form coalesced from the light. It was a hologram, but of a fidelity that was physically impossible. It did not seem projected. It seemed woven from the fabric of the room itself. It depicted a woman, her features unremarkable by the dramatic standards of her species, art, but possessing a stillness that was utterly captivating. She wore a simple, dark garment that absorbed the light of the sanctum. Her expression was neutral, her eyes holding a depth that seemed to reflect the star-strewn void itself. "I am Ambassador Eva Rostova," she said. Her voice was not transmitted through any speaker, but resonated directly in their minds, perfectly translated, yet carrying the distinct timbre and cadence of her species. It was a calm, measured voice, devoid of fear, anger, or subservience. "I speak for the Terran Concordance. I thank you for this audience." Cress surged forward, his voice a roar. "You have no right to be here, human. Your presence defiles this sanctum. You have violated 1,000 edicts, breached an unbreachable quarantine. Explain your aggression. Explain the disappearance of our patrols." The hologram of Eva Rostova did not flinch. She simply turned her head slightly, her gaze meeting the General Archon S. The stillness in her eyes was an armor no physical weapon could penetrate. "There was no aggression, General Archon. The Veil of Exile was, as you intended, a perfect prison. Nothing could pass through it in normal spacetime. Your patrols were not destroyed. They were collected." She raised a hand, and the holographic display around her shifted. It showed one of the missing Vorlag patrol cruisers, perfectly intact, floating in a sea of absolute blackness. The crew were visible through the viewports, alive, seemingly unharmed, but frozen in time. The ship was suspended in a bubble of distorted reality. "We perceived your patrols as a potential complication," Rostova continued, her voice maintaining its impossible calm. "We did not wish them harm, nor did we wish for a misunderstanding to escalate. So we simply moved them. They have been held in a localized temporal stasis outside of normal causality. They are safe. When our conversation is concluded, they and their memories of the last cycle will be returned to your space, precisely where we found them." The implication of her words settled over the Council like a shroud. To collect a fleet of warships to place them in a stasis outside of time was not an act of war. It was an act of godhood. It was a display of power so overwhelming, so casually executed, that Cress's talk of fleets and sterilization seemed like the tantrum of a child. He was silent, his jaw working as his mind failed to process the sheer scale of the technological disparity. Xyler felt his own crystalline structure vibrating with a frequency he had not experienced before. It was not fear, it was awe. Been right, they had not been festering, they had been ascending. "You speak of moving our ships as if it were a trivial matter," Xyler projected, his thought tone a complex chord of wonder and trepidation. "The energy signatures, the phenomenon that ignores the fundamental laws of physics. This is your doing. What have you become in the darkness we cast you into?" Rostova's expression softened, a subtle shift that conveyed a universe of meaning. It was not pity, but something akin to understanding. "You call it darkness, we called it solitude. You built a wall to keep us in. We used it as a lens. The Veil of Exile, the space-time blockade you created, generates immense gravitational and quantum pressures at its boundary. Your science saw it as an impassable barrier. Our science saw it as an engine." The display shifted again. It showed the veil not from the outside, a shimmering curtain of distorted light, but from within. From the human perspective, the veil was a roiling, incandescent sphere of pure energy, a captive star wrapped around their cluster of worlds. You gave us the ultimate laboratory, Rostova explained. An environment where the constants of the universe were malleable. We had to abandon conventional physics to survive. We stopped thinking about moving asterisk through asterisk space and started thinking about moving space itself. We learned to weave it, to fold it. The energy signature you detected was not a weapon. It was the resonance of our primary transit system coming online. A system that does not travel from point A to point B, but brings point B to point A. She paused, letting the concept settle into the stunned minds of the council. The reason I can stand here in your most secure chamber is because I am not being projected across space. A section of your chamber's space, a few cubic meters in volume, has been momentarily exchanged with a corresponding section from my location within the veil. I am, for all intents and purposes, physically here. The journey took no time because no distance was crossed. The Lumina emissary pulsed with a brilliant, intense light, a wave of pure astonishment washing through the sanctum. Even they, who perceived reality in ways other species could not, were taken aback. The humans had not broken the laws of physics, they had rewritten them. And why now? Xyler asked, his mind reeling. For centuries you remained silent. Why reveal yourselves at this moment, to display your power, to demand vengeance for your exile? Vengeance, Rostova's lips curved into a faint, sad smile. Vengeance is a concept rooted in the belief that the past can be altered by an act in the present. It is inefficient. We have no interest in it. We did not come for retribution. We came to return a courtesy. She looked directly at Xyler, her gaze piercing. You cast us out because you feared our nature. You feared our chaos, our individuality, our ambition. You believed it would lead to galactic ruin. You were not entirely wrong to be cautious. Our own history is a testament to the destructive potential of our spirit, but you were wrong about its ultimate trajectory. The hologram expanded, showing them glimpses of human civilization within the veil. There were no images of warships or armies. Instead, they saw cities that were living sculptures, structures that flowed and reformed like water, integrated with nature in ways the Silans could only dream of. They saw individuals engaged in pursuits of pure creation, art that spanned nebulae, music composed from the gravitational waves of binary pulsars, philosophical debates that lasted for generations. They saw a society that had not crushed its individuality, but had elevated it, channeling it into a collective engine of discovery and expression. They had solved the fundamental paradox of their own nature. They had achieved unity not through conformity, but through a mutual respect for their infinite diversity. Our chaos was the engine of our evolution, Rostova said, her voice soft but resonant with unshakable conviction. It forced us to develop systems of ethics and governance that could withstand the friction of true individual freedom. We learned that the ultimate expression of the self is not domination, but contribution. We did not come here to boast. We came here because your patrols were the first sign that you were becoming agitated, that your fear was leading you, General Archon, to consider a drastic, irreversible act. We chose to intervene before you made a mistake that you would regret for millennia. She turned her gaze back to Cress, who stood rigid, his entire worldview shattered in a matter of minutes. You see us as a threat, but the truth, General Archon, is that for a very long time we have been protecting you. Protecting us? Cress finally managed to stammer, the word catching in his throat. From what? From yourselves? No, Ambassador Rostova said, and for the first time a flicker of something calm and vast entered her eyes. The quiet stillness of her demeanor was replaced by a gravity that seemed to pull at the very light in the room. Not from ourselves, from what lies beyond. The chamber, which had been filled with a stunned silence, now fell into a silence that was deeper, more absolute. The political tensions, the ancient fears, the shock of the technological reveal, all of it evaporated, replaced by a new, dawning apprehension. Rostova's tone had changed. The discussion had shifted from the past to the future, and her calm demeanor now seemed less like a sign of superiority and more like the grim composure of a sentinel on a long and lonely watch. You live in a galaxy that feels ancient and infinite, Rostova continued, her voice a low, somber current. You have charted its arms, catalogued its stars, and established a stable, peaceful order. You believe you are the masters of your domain, but your perspective is limited. You have only ever looked inward at each other. You have never truly looked out. The holographic display around her dissolved, replaced by a view that no one in the sanctum had ever seen. It was a map, but not of the galaxy. It was a map of the local Galactic group, showing their own spiral galaxy, Andromeda, and the dozens of dwarf galaxies that surrounded them like scattered jewels on black velvet. But the map was wrong. It was dynamic, time-accelerated, showing the movement and evolution of these galaxies over billions of years. And there was a blight upon it. In the far corner of the map, a dwarf galaxy flickered and then went dark. Not in an explosion, but a slow, cold fade. Its light signature changed, reddened, and then vanished entirely, leaving a patch of absolute blackness where billions of stars had once shone. Millennia passed in an instant on the display, and another, more distant galaxy suffered the same fate. Then another. It was a creeping, inexorable void, a stain spreading across the cosmos, swallowing light and life. It moved with a terrifyingly slow, patient purpose. "What is this?" Xyler projected, the amethyst light of his form wavering, shot through with threads of pure white alarm. "Some kind of cosmological phenomenon? A simulation?" "It is not a simulation," Rostova said, her voice heavy with the weight of the knowledge she carried. "It is observational data gathered over the entirety of our exile. The engine you inadvertently provided us, the veil, allowed us to develop sensors that do not rely on light or gravity. We learned to sense the structure of spacetime itself, to read the echoes and resonances left in the cosmic fabric. We began to look further, deeper than any civilization had before, and we found this. We call it the Great Silence." The members of the council stared at the map, at the slow, methodical death of galaxies. The political squabbles, the pride, the fear of humanity, it all seemed like the concerns of infants in the face of this cosmic horror. "It is not a natural process," Rostova stated, her words striking with the force of physical blows. "Natural galactic death is a vibrant, chaotic affair of supernovae and stellar collapse. This is different. It is orderly. It is efficient. The light does not just die. It is consumed. The information, the complexity, the very essence of what was once a galaxy is erased, leaving nothing behind but a null space, a wound in the universe." A low, guttural sound of disbelief came from General Archon Kress. "An enemy? A force that consumes entire galaxies? Impossible. The energy required would be beyond comprehension." "It does not use energy as we understand it," Rostova replied, her gaze fixed on the creeping darkness in the display. "It seems to feed on existence itself. We do not know what it is. A civilization, a natural law of the universe we have yet to discover, a form of life so alien it operates on principles we cannot yet grasp. We do not know, we only know its direction of travel, we know its speed, and we know that it is coming." She zoomed the map in, tracing the trajectory of the encroaching silence. The path was long, spanning millions of light years, but the line it drew was unmistakable. It was pointed directly toward their local group, directly toward Andromeda, and then toward them. "By our most conservative estimates," Rostova said, her voice dropping to a near whisper that echoed in the vast chamber, "it will reach the outer edges of our galaxy in approximately 100,000 of your standard years." A wave of collective shock rippled through the delegates. 100,000 years was an eternity to some, but to the Lumina or to the ancient memory of the Cathar, it was the blink of an eye. And to a threat that consumed galaxies, it was the final moment before impact. "This is why you have returned," Xyler realized, his mind finally grasping the true, terrifying scale of the situation. "This is why you revealed yourselves, not for power, not for revenge, but because you needed allies." "We did not return for allies," Rostova corrected him gently, a profound sadness in her eyes. "We returned because you are not our enemies. You are our neighbors. You are, in the broadest sense, our family. We spent our exile overcoming our own divisions. We will not stand by and watch the only other intelligent life we have ever known be extinguished by an indifferent void because of an ancient quarrel." She looked around the chamber, her gaze resting on each delegate in turn, the terrified Silan, the stunned Vorlag, the shimmering Lumina, the awestruck Cathar. "Your galaxy is built on consensus, on harmony, on stability. These are virtues, but they are the virtues of peacetime. They will not serve you now. What is coming requires a different set of skills. It requires innovation born of desperation. It requires the chaotic, unpredictable spark of individuality. It requires the ability to stare into the abyss and not just hold the line, but to leap into it, armed with nothing but a defiant question." The truth of her words was undeniable. The entire structure of the Galactic Council, their millennia of tradition and rigid diplomacy, was designed to prevent internal conflict. It was utterly unprepared for a truly external threat, especially one of this magnitude. Humanity, on the other hand, their entire history was a story of facing existential threats, often of their own making, and finding a way to survive. Their outlawed nature was, in fact, the precise quality the galaxy now needed. "We have been studying it," Rostova said, gesturing to the grim map. "We have theories, we have avenues of research that you have never even conceived of, but we have been doing it alone. Our resources, while significant, are finite. The minds of humanity, while versatile, are limited. The challenge ahead is greater than any one species. She paused, and the hologram of her form seemed to become more solid, more present, imbued with a new sense of purpose. The Edict of Exile is a historical footnote. Your fear of us is an artifact of a bygone era. We are not here to ask for our freedom. We have already taken it. We are not here to ask for forgiveness. We do not require it. We are here to offer a proposal. Not as outlaws to their jailers, but as equals facing a common night. Let us work together. Let us combine your stability with our dynamism, your wisdom with our curiosity. Let us face the great silence not as 100 squabbling species, but as one galactic mind. The silence that followed was different from all that had come before. It was not the silence of tension or of fear. It was the silence of profound, world-altering contemplation. The entire history of the Galactic Council, its edicts, its wars, its alliances, had just been rendered preamble to a much larger, much darker story. The human problem, the great philosophical debate that had defined galactic politics for centuries, was over. And in its place stood a human solution, a human invitation. Xyler of the Cathar looked at the calm, determined face of the human ambassador. He saw in her eyes not the chaotic vermin of the Council's propaganda, but a maturity forged in a crucible of unimaginable pressure. A maturity that his own, ancient civilization had perhaps never been forced to attain. He felt the fear, the awe, and the dawning realization coalesce into a single, crystalline thought, a perfect, clear note that he projected into the sanctum for all to hear. The Edict of Exile is hereby repealed, he stated, his voice ringing with an authority that no one, not even Cress, dared to challenge. Let the records of the Galactic Council show that on this day humanity has returned, and they have brought the universe with them. Ambassador Eva Rostova gave a slow, solemn nod. The grim map of the consuming void remained behind her, a silent testament to the task ahead. The fear was still there, a cold background radiation in the hearts of all present. But for the first time in a very long time, it was accompanied by something else. A flicker of defiant, chaotic, unpredictable hope. A uniquely human light now shining in the heart of the galaxy, ready to face the encroaching dark. The long exile was over. The real work had just begun.